Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Point Blank. I'm your host, Reformed Bad Boy Dryden. Today is a beautiful Wednesday, and I'm recording this way too late. So let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about so many different stories that have been going on this week. This week has been crazy for culture. A little bit of politics as well, but that's kind of boring. Let's stick to culture. So today we're going to be talking about Jon Stewart, Kanye West, this article I read, and then we're going to be talking about the Bible, of course, because that's what we do here on Point Blank. So without further ado, let's get into our first video. This is Jon Stewart, and he's, you know, he's one of those guys who I don't really understand because I am actually Gen Z, and I don't really get these late night comedian host guys. I never really watched him growing up because, again, I'm Gen Z, so I'm a little bit of a youngin' compared to the older generations. So I don't really know this guy, but what I do know is that he's a complete lunatic, and sorry for the ad hominem, but it's just a fact. It's just true. So let's watch this together. He's if he's not a complete lunatic, which he probably isn't, he's really not a complete lunatic, but he is a sellout, and he's sold out for the left and for transgenderism specifically in this video here.
We are in a new dawn of gender and sex complexity, where those who don't fit into a simple binary are meant to be seen with humanity. It wasn't always like this, people. As recently as, let's say, the 1990s, early 2000s, people were making shitty, reductive jokes about the subject.
I guess that's a self-burn. He's not looking too great. He looks, I don't know. I've noticed this pretty often, and I don't mean this to be mean, but I've noticed that people on the left, people who scream their abortion and are super pro-death and pro-killing babies in the womb, people who, vegans, people who don't eat meat, don't drink milk, all these people, the trannies, who else? The queers, they all look bad on the outside, and it's because they're evil and wicked on the inside and so depraved that it has spread through their body and moved into the outside, and now their outside matches the inside, and that's why they are ugly people on the inside and out. Now, they can be cleaned. You can have your insides cleaned and thus your outsides cleaned. I've seen this before. Look up any video. We talked about this last week on the podcast. Any person who transed and then they wanted to trans back, you know, quote unquote, they can't really transition. We know that. But people who regret their transition and go back to being what they were born as and what they remained, even during their delusion, they look better. You know, these girls who went on testosterone, if they've regretted it and switched back, they grow out their hair again. They look more feminine because they always looked feminine, but they get to look feminine again. And they look better. And that's because when Jesus Christ cleanses you, you don't have to be crazy. You don't have to be so depraved, and you don't have to be so against nature. I brought this up in a video a long time ago where I talked about how all these feminists having green and blue and pink hair, it was an attack on nature. Changing your hair color in that way, you notice how all these lib women are like this, where they have the blue hair and it's the pronouns in the bio. It's because it is an attack on God. It's an attack on what's natural. They want to be their own God, so they dye their hair and go crazy. So that was a long, convoluted way of saying that Jon Stewart here isn't looking too good. He's not looking too good. I mean, I don't know how old this man is. I don't know. This made sense in my head. Don't be mean to me about this. Let's see. Jon Stewart. Yeah, he's not even 60. He's 59 years old, but he's looking straight up like he's, 69 years old. Just saying.
What can I say? The joke rhymed. And shitty and reductive jokes are kind of my brand.
Actually, no, from this angle, he's looking a lot more handsome. Maybe I'll take those comments back a little bit. Let's keep going. This is up in the air.
As we know from history, any moment of progressive visibility will be met with a vicious backlash.
There are two genders.
There are two genders. And
Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson.
Everyone knows it.
Ain't but two.
Who's this guy? I don't know who this is.
Met with a vicious backlash.
There are two genders.
There are two genders, and everyone knows it.
Ain't but two genders.
There's the smug look of this false piousness and superiority that he has.
That last guy sounded like it's an emergency and we're running out of genders. Everyone, there ain't but two genders. I don't want to have to start rationing genders. The point is clear. The human race is defined by a simple binary, a black and white understanding.
True.
There are men and there are women.
Absolutely true.
And never the twain shall meet.
Yep.
Trump is an alpha male.
Well, okay, yes, there are obviously men who are more man than other men, but that's an aberration.
Beta, gamma.
Okay.
Okay.
There's an entire Greek alphabet, a continuum of masculinity, but that doesn't mean cuck.
Pajama boy, soy boy.
Girly man.
See, here's the thing, though. This guy, Jon Stewart, he thinks he's so smart because he's showing that there is a spectrum of masculinity. But guess what? Guess what that spectrum has in common? A penis. Every single man has a penis. And some can be more effeminate and some can be more masculine. That's a spectrum, but that's also just personality, characteristic. That's just, it doesn't change the fact that that man has a penis. Now, there's no third gender. There's no third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth gender. People on the left, they try to take gender and separate it from sex, but they are indeed the same thing. Because anyone who is born, here's what they try to explain. I can explain it simply. They say that yes, there's biological sex, and that is a binary. But they say gender, which is sexual expression, is a spectrum. Here's the issue with that, though. That doesn't change the binary of sex. There are two. Male and female. Actually, in fact, here in Genesis 1:27, it says, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them." That's from my Physical Bible, hashtag Physical Bible Gang, sponsored. There's no third gender. Gender expression, as much as you try to separate gender expression from the binary sexes, you can't. Because like we reviewed in a video last week where we watched a video of this girl who was acting like a man, she had the honesty and integrity to say that she was pretending to be like what she thought a man was supposed to be like. But she doesn't actually know what it's like to be a man because she's indeed a woman. See how that works? So all these people who believe in this gender expression, that's true, you can't express your gender or your sex in a specific way. Biblically, we know that women, their hair is a beautiful part about them. We know that for men, being strong is a great thing about being a man, is that you are the physically stronger vessel. That's good things. But if a woman tries to be strong like a man, she's acting like a man. She might have the wrong gender expression, and I would argue that that's a sin because she's not expressing her sex in the way that she should, like a woman, like a godly woman. And above all, she still has a vagina, not a penis. She still, on a chromosomal level, has different DNA structure, bone density, strength, stature. So yeah, I do believe that there is such thing as gender expression, but that doesn't mean there's multiple genders, which is synonymous with sex, which is binary. So this is why LGBTQ community doesn't work at all, because lesbian, bi, gay, lesbian, gay, bi, LGB, lesbian, gay, bi, proves or suggests that there's only two genders, because lesbians love women. They like women. Gay men like men. Which means at a certain point, those men and those women who like their own sex can differentiate between men and women. I read this Reddit post a long time ago. It's disgusting. I never actually made a video on it, because it's quite foul. But it was a trans It's so confusing. It was a guy pretending to be a girl, but he still had his penis. But he also claimed to be a lesbian. So it's a guy pretending to be a girl who was interested in women. Therefore, he is still straight because he is a man. He's not a woman, obviously. Anyone who's cognitive and sane knows that. He said that his quote-unquote lesbian partners, because he thought he was a woman, didn't like giving him oral sexual pleasure because, quote, it was too male down there, or it was too penis-y down there. And that gave him gender dysphoria. He said, how can this be? I'm a woman. Guess what, dingus? If you have a penis, you're a male. It's that simple. It always has been. And that's what he even says. It's always been that way up until a year ago. And that is because we are in just judgment time right now. The nation's dividing over this, and we're going to talk about that later. I see a lot of hope, and I see a lot of good stuff that's happening. So I'm very excited about what's going on, and I'll explain why later. But let's keep going with this video.
I hope the children are out of the room. Clearly, masculinity appears to be on a dimmer, not an on-off switch, but ladies are different.
I was a big tomboy.
These purple-haired angry freaks.
Rabid feminist.
Cat lady.
high rolling bimbos.
Pretty girly girl.
My God, what a cruise line buffet of the gradients in American gender expression. Turns out there's a lot of non-binary shit happening between the binaries.
See, but that doesn't even make sense at all because there is binary. So when you have a woman who's more masculine and when you have a man who's more feminine, you're just proving that there is a binary because it's one or the other. They are either presenting themselves as more feminine or as more masculine. Therefore, there's only two genders and sex, which again are synonymous, male and female. Women can act like men. Men can act like women. I think it's a sin. But that doesn't prove that there's this amazing non-binary spectrum. A true non-binary person would be someone who has no male parts, no female parts. No, it would have to go deeper than that. A true non-binary person would be someone who has no male or female chromosomes. They're just a non-binary cell. It doesn't make any sense because even if you take a woman and you remove all her parts and pieces, she still had the capacity to be a woman and to have womanly things, such as giving birth to children and breastfeeding children. If you take a man and hack off everything that's attached to him, he's still a man on his DNA. And on a DNA level, he's still a man.
That hasn't stopped the traditionalists from deploying their newest weapon in the culture war arsenal, the obvious gotcha question.
The real basic question, what is a woman?
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
For all of recorded history, people have known what a woman is.
Yes!
So the reason why we asked this simple question is because if you say anything other than a woman is a person with capabilities of womanhood or capacity for womanly behavior, such as pregnancy, breastfeeding, all that sort of thing. If you say anything other than that, or you say it's more nuanced than that, or you say it's more complicated than that, then I know that I don't have to listen to your stupid opinion. Because you are not being honest with yourself, you're not being honest with nature, and you have an agenda that I don't like. I have an agenda, but guess what? I like my agenda, and I don't like your agenda.
All of recorded history. It was simple. Until like a year ago. The answer to what is a woman has always been the same. It's a woman is a deformity that occurred in the ordinary course of nature. I'm sorry, that's Aristotle.
It's Aristotle, but it's not biblical, as I just read earlier.
I apologize. I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. I meant a woman is a person. who has no legal existence once married. I'm sorry, that's early American coverture law. That's not right. No.
You know, that's actually kind of based, though. I think this would actually be a good thing for women. It says, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage. That's kind of true. I mean, that's also biblical that the two will become one flesh. We have this sense that married couples are one being, one person. Obviously, they physically and tangibly aren't, but on a much more spiritual level, which is a little bit incomprehensible, but we know it shows the love God has for the church. This is kind of a good thing. And I would bring up the counterpoint, which is also maybe the man's legal existence should be suspended during the marriage too, because he's not just worried about his own existence, he's now worried about the existence of his wife. That's kind of interesting. I think I'd like to think about that more sometime.
Throughout history, it's not a gotcha question. A woman is 30 shekels.
A woman is not 30 shekels. A woman's worth potentially could be 30 shekels. Very different. A woman is literally not 30 shekels. Just like if a woman acts like a man, it doesn't make her literally a man. I had to look up some commentary on Leviticus 27:4 because it's very... This is a subject that's actually not terribly complicated, but it's hard to understand. Basically, it talks about how people in the Old Testament, if they wanted to consecrate themselves or their children to the divine service in some inferior or servile kind of work about the sanctuary. So if you wanted to use your own body as a living sacrifice to God and work in the sanctuary, work in the temple, you could. And it seems as though they would get paid depending on their worth. Now, this is something that communists hate because communists want everything to be equal. They say equality of outcome. Equality of outcome is just super silly because the guy who's working more than the guy who's not working as much is going to be upset and he's going to stop working because of the equality of outcome. And then you're just going to have a bunch of poor people, which is going to turn into a crazy, terrible oppression. Not good. But basically, men, like I said earlier, are stronger, so they were worth more in the sense that they had more responsibility. Women who are physically weaker, which is a true statement, were worth less, but that's because they didn't have as much responsibility. That's as simple as that. That's all. I'm going to leave it at that.
I'm sorry, that's Leviticus. Unless she's whorish, then a woman is a loaf of bread.
So this I looked up because this is just another silly thing. This is Proverbs 6:26. And this is basically talking about why you should stay away from prostitutes and instead try to find a wife, a good woman. Because the verse earlier, verse 25, says, "Do not desire her beauty in her heart." This is talking about the evil woman. "Do not let her capture you with her eyelashes, for the price of a prostitute is only a loaf of bread." So, cheap thrills, a prostitute, is only the price of a loaf of bread, meaning it's cheap. It's not good. But in the same verse, which he neglects to show here, says, "But a married woman hunts down a precious life." Have you noticed that moms and wives and typically the nice Christian ladies, and I'm not talking about the fake Karen Christian ladies, but I'm talking about the real, genuine Christian ladies, are the happiest women on earth. They have a bunch of children, they have a beautiful home that their husband hopefully has provided for them, and then they make it nice. They fill it with way too many pillows. They fill it with things that are soft and warm and comfortable, and they fill it with food and pleasing aromas. I don't have anything that smells good in my house because I live with a bunch of men, because we're a bunch of single guys. But if I was to live in a house with a woman, let's say if I was to go back and live with my mom and dad, where my mom runs the home would smell nice. And that is because a married woman hunts down a precious life. But a prostitute is worth a loaf of bread. Not much.
Proverbs. Yes.
All right, and that's the end of The Problem with Jon Stewart. I love the comments because most of them are against him, talking about how The Problem with Jon Stewart is such a good title for his podcast, I guess, or show, Apple TV show, because he's the problem. Now, nothing could have said it better than this one comment I found. And really, comment sections, they just always blow me out of the water with how smart and intellectual and intelligent these people are. Underdog Anomaly says, John has truly lost his mind. How could you even discriminate against a woman in ancient times if you can't establish what a woman even is? This comment by Ian, a girl that does stereotypically boy things is not less of a girl. A woman that has short hair or doesn't wear a dress or makeup is not less of a woman. Stereotypes do not make someone a woman. Being an adult human female does. Oh, that's great. Yeah, so here's the problem with Jon Stewart, other than that being the title of his show, is that he never gave his own definition of a woman. If this is such a conservative right gotcha question, why can't you answer the question, which simply is, what is a woman? And I would say it's a human female with the capacity of womanhood, meaning the ability naturally to give birth, breastfeed, and even if she can't, if she's had a hysterectomy because of cancer or some other disease or something, if she's lost her breast to breast cancer, at some point in her life, she still had the capacity she had the ability to be able to do that. Me over here with my penis, I can't do that. Just saying, I can't birth a baby, and I never will be able to. And guess what? That's okay. It's totally okay. It's totally fair. I can't be upset with it. I have to be happy and thankful with what God has given me. God made me a man on purpose, and he made me a man, and I'm thankful for that because that's the gift that was given to me. If I was a woman, I would be thankful with what he's given to me. Now, of course, God made me a super handsome, genuine, kind, loving, super handsome, hilarious man. You know, I have all these amazing qualities. I'm probably the most humble guy in the room right now. But that's just how it goes. That's just the cards that were rolled. So something that kind of relates to this comes from the Daily Wire over here. This is researcher debunks claim trans-identified youth's mental health improves with gender-affirming care. Now, remember I talked about this last week in the Trans Epidemic of Regret podcast. Go watch it if you haven't already, or listen to it on Spotify, Audible, and Apple Podcasts. I talked about how the Trevor Project paid, the Trevor Project came out with a study that proved, quote unquote, that trans people, after they have these surgeries, are actually happier and healthier than before they had them, thus proving, quote unquote, that children should be allowed to have these surgeries. Now, here's the thing. The Trevor Project is being funded by hospitals that make money off of these surgeries. So it's just a loop of money going around. And finally, it's been called out. Over here, claims that scientific studies show clear mental health benefits of, quote, gender-affirming medical treatments for trans-identifying youth are exaggerated and misleading, according to a news analysis. Lior Sapir, a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, found that claims of casualty frequently cited by news outlets are not supported by evidence, and that some of those studies commonly touted as demonstrating positive mental health outcomes show no or possibly even negative association between hormones and mental health. Let's keep going down. So basically this came back from either the Trevor Project or this one, in this case is Dr. Jack Turbin, who says 16 studies that purportedly show so-called gender-affirming care for trans youth results in favorable mental health outcomes. That's his quote. The language of results in can easily lead the reader to believe that hormonal interventions can cause improved mental health. But that's not actually what's true. So Sapir, who investigated all of this, broke down the 16 studies that Turbin wrote and relied upon, and determined that Turbin oversold or misrepresented the strength of evidence in order to mislead his readers into embracing the controversial gender affirmation protocol. Several of the studies were short-term follow-ups, which by definition cannot capture long-term feelings about medical transition. Let's see if there's anything else. There's selection bias in these research studies. Lots of selection bias. That's what it talks about. Let's see if there's anything else of value in this article before I just talk too long about this. Sample sizes are too small. Oh, wow. What is this? Turbin also likes to say that all experts agree with the gender-affirming model, a statement that is only true if you define expert. In no true Scotsman-like fashion, as someone who agrees with Turbin, said Sapir, while health authorities in Sweden, Finland, and UK have unanimously concluded after systematic reviews of evidence for puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones that the risks and uncertainties outweigh any known benefits. So Turbin, the guy who wrote this article, similar to the Trevor Project, all that sort of thing, blah, 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 is saying that all experts agree. Except guess what? Ding, ding, ding. Not all experts agree. And it wasn't that difficult to prove because there's multiple countries, including the UK, that do not like it. So let's see. One long-term study on adults in Sweden shows that 10 to 15 years after sex reassignment surgery, the suicide rate of those patients was 19 times that of comparable peers. To date, no long-term studies on minors transitioned under gender-affirming approach exist, as it is a relatively new phenomenon. This is very new, and the ramifications are going to be immense, to say the least. Let's see if I can gather up any numbers real quick. Let's see. Numbers. Chapter 2 of this book. Right here. Between 2009 and 2017, the number of high schoolers who contemplated suicide increased 25%. The number of teens diagnosed with clinical depression grew 35% between 2005 and 2014. And that is 8 years ago. It's getting worse. Like I said earlier, I will talk about why I think things are getting better, but there's a lot of things that are getting worse first. Now, I need to find the number on transgenderism in the UK, because that's kind of important. I believe that there was rates of, here it is, between 2016 and 2017, the number of gender surgeries for natal females in the US quadrupled, with biological women suddenly accounting for, as we have seen, 70% of all gender surgeries. So this majoritatively, this affects women more than men. In 2018, the UK reported a 4,400% rise in over a previous decade in teenage girls seeking gender treatments. Two patterns stood out. First, the clear majority, 65% of the adolescent girls who had discovered transgender identity in adolescence out of the blue had done so after a period of prolonged social media immersion. Second, the prevalence of transgender identification within some of the girls' friend groups was more than 70 times the expected rate. So basically, there's a common cause for all of this, which is exposed or prolonged exposure to social media. Do not give your kids smartphones. Do not give your kids social media. As I have said before, in my whole podcast about social media, you can look it up. It's from a few weeks ago. I don't have social media on my phone. My social media accounts, which I use to promote this podcast and only to promote this podcast. I don't use them anymore for entertainment or wasting time. I use them for this, what I'm making a hopefully a career out of. That's what I use it for. And it's on my computer. I don't even have YouTube on my phone. I don't have YouTube. I don't have anything on my phone for social media. Because for me personally, I was wasting too much time on it. And also, to be frank, there's way too much temptation on there for young men. That's just not worth it. Now, for young women, they have a similar temptation, but it is to self-harm and mutilate their bodies. And it's because, quite frankly, I guess at that age, they hate their bodies because they are not as beautiful as the photoshopped models. So don't give your kids social media. I mean, or just smartphones in general. Don't make sure you guard their internet connection. And this, I'm saying that for children, that you should know what they're doing. You should, if you have to have a computer, keep it not in their room, because that's just a good rule for anyone. I have accountability apps on my computer. I have accountability partners, such as my dad. And that is because sin is serious. And as good and as Christian as you think you are, you can follow into it so easily. Just like so many men have in the Old and New Testaments. Just like all the stories of people in the Bible. So careful what you're looking at. According to... I'm freestyling a little bit right now, but according to Philippians 4, let me find that. Philippians 4, we're supposed to think about good things. This is Philippians 4:8. It says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, before anyone gets smart with me in the comments, that is God. That is not a different God of peace. No, it's talking about how God is a peaceful God. He obviously does judge his enemies, but that's a little side story. So, careful with social media. That goes for guys and girls for different reasons, sometimes similar reasons. It's a spectrum, man. It's a spectrum. In other news, this is why I am hopeful, is because we have seen Italy raise up a Christian prime minister, which let's see, Italy prime minister. I forgot her name already. Let's see. Giorgia Meloni. So, I learned something new about her, which I don't think she's married. She has a partner. Now I'm just wasting time. This is something I'll look into later. Let's see if, okay, personal life. She has a partner, but not a husband, even though she's Christian. So that's a problem. But what's not a problem is the fact that she is more on the right track than these crazy leftists, which is good. We also talked about William Ruto, the new president of Kenya, and how he's a Christian and he's declaring Kenya a Christian nation. That doesn't mean that every single person in Kenya is saved and is Christian, but we're getting there. That is how the gospel works. It enters into foreign lands and it changes things like nothing else can. So I wanted to watch. This is just the latest good news when it comes to politics and people who are returning to the right or leaving the left and going to the right for the first time ever. It's a good thing to happen because it is significantly better than the left right now. This is Tulsi Gabbard.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
What a politician. Side note, she's a very attractive politician. There's not a lot of those because they're all like 80 years old. She's on it. obviously she's reading from a script, so it doesn't sound like it's super from the heart, but she needed to be concise. That's what politicians do. They don't really talk like how I talk. You know, I'm just a normal guy. Sure, I might be superiorly handsome, but that's just how it is. So Tulsi is leaving the Democratic Party. That's great. Hopefully people who are similar to her will leave as well. Because when you vote blue, that's what you're voting for. You're voting for the release of criminals. You're voting for the rejection of in defunding the police, which I don't like police as much as the next guy. They need to be reformed, but not defunded, because there's still criminals out there. You're also voting for the mutilation of children. You're voting for abortion. You're voting for rights being taken away, God-given rights taken away. Now, those rights can never really be taken away, but you could definitely be in a lot of hot water with the government, which is not a good thing. So this is a good step forward. So that's what you get for if you vote blue. If you vote red, you get a bunch of wimpy politicians who have no backbone and no spine, and they don't wield authority when they have it. That's sad as well. But there are better people on the right, so that's a good thing. All right, I'm going to get into the comments section as we get towards the end of this show. Let's see if there's any comments worthwhile other than just blatant hate comments. I get a lot of comments on the YouTube Shorts. That's where I get most of my comments, because the YouTube Shorts pop off and everything else is pretty normal. Let's see. The LGBT, this comes from Vesper Snow. This is quoting me. I said the LGBTQ community cannot produce children. And then they say, me when trans women and trans men exist. Here's the issue, though. Trans people who are hopped up on so much of the opposite hormone cannot have children at a certain point. A woman who hacks off her breasts and has a hysterectomy, she can't have a child. That's just how it goes. A man who takes so much estrogen and potentially, I don't know how many trans guys go through with chopping off their dick, but I mean, it's probably a small number. But regardless, with that much estrogen, with that much chemicals in your body, you can't really have children. Hopefully, you wouldn't have children because you have a mental disorder. You have gender dysphoria, which, you know, up until 2 seconds ago was crazy. You would get tossed in the loony bin. When did that change? It's in the book. I try to read physical books. So I'm reading this book right now. When Harry Became Sally. So it's not like I just have the one book. No, I have multiple books I've been reading through slowly. Because it gives me a false sense of okay, yeah. All right, let's continue before I say something dumb. T-Ray says, I agree with your points, but at the end of the video particularly, you start to argue and state your opinions in a really immature way. You start calling people in the video names, cut off their statements, and fail to refute their points clearly. I totally agree with you, even the insults, but if you're trying to be persuasive, then insulting people and voicing your own arguments without engaging in the opposing arguments isn't going to work. If you're not going to try to be persuasive, just trying to amuse yourself or others or whatever, it doesn't seem that productive. So I went back and I watched that because I read this comment earlier, and basically what I said was, okay, that's enough, shut up, queer shirt, glasses lady. She literally had a shirt that said queer. So I wasn't making fun of her shirt by saying it was gay. I was saying she literally was wearing a gay t-shirt. Now, two things. One, for 40 minutes, I refuted their arguments. And in the last few minutes, I got pretty winded, I would say, and I made some ad hominem attacks. I made some insults and mockery, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Even the Apostle Paul uses mockery, and I think you can use it well. And I've said this before, but we need to bring bullying back. You know, at a certain point, if there's someone who's spouting off crazy things, let's say they're saying something absolutely crazy. Let's think of something like, oh, men can be women. I'm going to say, no, you're retarded because men can't become women. And they say, well, proof, source. And I can say, no, I don't need a source. You're just dumb and you're just being silly and stupid. And that's all I need to do. I refuted them for 40 minutes. Last few minutes, I made fun of them. I think that's a pretty good ratio. Let's see. This is from Theological Zest. Rapists are deserving of death, of course, but I wonder if Dryden would be consistent enough to say getting an abortion is deserving of death too, because it absolutely is. Should we implement the death penalty for those who've had abortions along with rapists? I think we should implement the death penalty for rapists, abortionists, so any surgeon who performs an abortion, and in some cases, the mother. Now, the reason I say in some cases is because some women have forced abortions. Forced abortions. It's not necessarily their choice, but someone is forcing them to do it. Maybe a evil boyfriend or a baby daddy or whatever is forcing them. I don't want to kill a woman who's forced to have an abortion. Now, the woman who says, scream your abortion, and she takes pride and posts about how she's had 11 abortions, 14 abortions, and I've seen that. Or the woman who on the news took an abortion pill while she was in an interview with the newscaster. Honestly, for her, death penalty. I'm consistent. Hopefully that's consistent enough for you, but also nuanced to protect the mothers who are forced to have abortions. Okay, let's see if there's anything else worthwhile. If you love God so much, do you believe slavery is okay? Because God loves it. Where do you even get this idea from? That doesn't make any sense to me, because Christians ended slavery. So, silly question, or silly comment. This is from Rocket Angel. She says, if someone came up to me, a woman, and asked me to name 5 parts of my own reproductive system, I would not be able to fulfill the request. Sorry, no opinion. One of the guys in my Discord, he had a great comeback to anyone who says no uterus, no opinion, and he basically said that's very transphobic of you. That's such a good one. I wish I came up with that. That's so good. But yeah, speaking of Discord, if you haven't already, please join the Discord by clicking the link down below. Also, huge thanks to my patrons. Thank you so much for your financial support of this channel. Thank you guys for your encouragement in liking all the videos, subscribing, hitting, leaving a comment, joining the Discord, financially supporting. Thank you guys so much for the support, because that is pushing me and that is fueling me to get better and to become even smarter than I already am, which is, dare I say, near impossible, but I'm somehow doing it anyway. So thank you guys so much. Again, this is new stuff I got going on, but if you are a Patreon supporter, you have exclusive content on Patreon every Friday after the show. I have a members block. So if you're not there for that, then sorry, you're missing out. That's all I got for you guys. I hope you have a super blessed day, and I'll see you all on Friday. Goodbye.